I got to talk about the Texas Rangers. That's right, the Texas Rangers. They have spent over $500 million to this point in free agency. Nobody saw this coming. You were looking for teams that were on the edge of success to come in and spend a bunch of money and become good, become great. The Texas Rangers just came in and crashed the party. They spent over $500 million. It started with Marcus Semien, 7 years, $175 million. This guy is 31 years old. Nobody thought he was signing a 7-year deal. But this kind of got the party going for the Rangers. You see, okay, 7 years, over $100 million, $170+ million. That takes him into his upper 30s. But what the Rangers have to do and had to do was spend a little more. Give guys a few extra years because they weren't winners. They were last place team in the AL West for a while. So you bring in a guy that's been, to this point, look, when he came over, when he had his year with the A's, he was an MVP candidate. He was in the top 3 of the MVP vote. Then he goes to Toronto, where this year, if not for Vlad Jr., he's the guy talked about there. This guy, Marcus Semien, is one of the most underrated players in all of Major League Baseball. So I was looking at a few places for him. I thought maybe he'd go to the Mariners. The Mariners are a good up-and-coming team. They look to be exciting in the future. He could go there. There were a few places. But he ends up signing with the Texas Rangers. They make a big splash to start free agency, and then you think, well, are they going for it? What are they going to do? You sign him for 7 years, but you're still not going to be very good. Well, they made another splash. Corey Seager, 10 years, $325 million. Are you kidding me? So there you have it. Their middle infield for at least 7 years is wrapped up. Corey Seager, 10 years. Marcus Semien, 7 years. Like I said, the Rangers have spent over $500 million to this point. $561 million so far has been wrapped up in free agency. $561 million. 10 of those years to Seager. So look, I talked about this a little while ago. When you're the Rangers, the Texas Rangers have been, and they've been the laughingstock of the AL West for a couple of years now. They move into a brand new stadium that is, from all accounts, it's one of the stadiums that I haven't been to. Hopefully I can cross that off soon. But from everything I've heard, it is special. It is absolutely incredible. So you move into this new stadium. You see the World Series hosted in the COVID season at your home stadium, but you're nowhere in sight because you were the worst team in baseball. You see all these teams playing in your stadium, but you're not very good. So you have this new stadium, you have a fan base that wants to win, and now they're going for it. And I absolutely love to see it. I've seen so many people, fans, saying, well, why are they spending this money? They're not, okay, you're going to spend this to be not a very good team. Well, one, what better place to start than your middle infield? Two, I love to see it. I'm tired of seeing all the same teams going for it. You know, you get the big market teams, you get the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Dodgers. Those teams are always going to go for it. It's fun to see this. It's fun to see a team that hasn't been very good, that moved into a beautiful stadium, that wants to win, spending over $500 million to get there. So they do that, they solidify their middle infield, and then they go out and get a good pitcher on the market in John Gray. John Gray is also an underrated pitcher because, well, he's been in Colorado for a while, so I'm sure he's happy to get out of Colorado where the ball absolutely flies. But this is a big signing for them. This was a big name. Obviously, he's not the top guy on the market. He wasn't the Max Scherzers. He wasn't the Justin Verlanders. He wasn't any of those guys. But he was a good starter, and they had that. So let's look at what the Texas Rangers have done. When you want to totally rebuild a team, when you want to totally redeem yourself and start over, what do? Well, you start up the middle. That's where it begins. So what do? They add a pitcher, John Gray. a good pitcher to go in the rotation. You get your middle infield, Corey Seager, Marcus Semien. You pay them $500 million. And then you have Adolis Garcia out there in center field who was almost a Rookie of the Year this year. He looks to be a very promising young stud. He plays good defense. He's fast. He has a bunch of power. So they just absolutely revamped the middle of their field, and that's where you begin, and I love what they have done. I love what the Texas Rangers have done to this point in free agency. They're going for it. They're tired of being last place in the AL West. They're going to spend a bunch of money to do it. They're going to put fans in the seats in their new, beautiful stadium, and I'm excited to see how they do. But what I want to do is talk to somebody that covers the Texas Rangers, that knows everything about the Texas Rangers. I'm excited to bring him in. He's from the Dallas Morning News, Evan Grant. So let's welcome in Evan. Thank you so much for joining me. Man, the Texas Rangers, I never saw this coming. This offseason has been all about them, in my opinion. This has been absolutely incredible what has been going on down there in Dallas. So thank you, first off, so much for joining me. But did you expect this? Did you see this coming this offseason? They were awful last year.
Yeah, Ben, I think that the Rangers had made it very clear that they intended to invest significantly in free agency this offseason. I don't know if I quite saw $561 million being committed, with the possibility that they're going to spend more whenever we resume transactions. But this team intended to make an honest effort at getting better. They addressed a number of needs that they thought were capable of being addressed this offseason. And I give them a lot of credit in that I thought it was possible that they'd go out and get one of the elite members of the shortstop class. I did not ever think that I'd look up and see them bringing home two of those guys. And it cost $500 million. It's a lot of money, but they've got two icon kind of cornerstone, the way Chris Woodward described them, pillar type of players for the future here.
I mean, over $500 million. It's insane. And one of those guys that, you just mentioned, two guys up the middle, one of them being Corey Seager, that I want to ask you about, because I had heard for at least a couple of years, and amongst the Dodgers, they believed this as well. When Corey Seager hit free agency, they thought he was going to the Texas Rangers. Why is that the case? Why was this, I don't want to say a foregone conclusion, but why did people just think, yeah, there's a good chance he ends up with the Rangers?
Well, my guess on this is that, first of all, Chris Woodward and Corey Seager have a really strong relationship that goes back to their time with the Dodgers. Woodward has a really strong relationship with the Seager family in general, going back to the time he worked with Kyle Seager in the Mariners organization. And so there was a matchup there, and I think it was very clear that Chris Woodward had a real high regard for Corey Seager and thought he was the kind of guy that dovetailed real well with the kind of culture the Rangers were putting together. I think also there was a lot of thought that the Rangers were going to need infield help. And whether that was as a second baseman, shortstop, or third baseman, there was going to be a need there. And so that had simply been sitting out there on the horizon. I will say this, that when the Rangers went into free agency, I thought that there was a real good fit for Trevor Story, being that he's a hometown guy, that it would probably have been kind of a shorter term deal. I thought that there was a real good fit for Carlos Correa, because I think he's as good a shortstop as there is in the game. But very clearly, Corey Seager was the guy in the Rangers' estimation that was going to be their number one target.
Well, you mentioned his brother Kyle, and let me say this. He's out there, Evan. He's out there in free agency. Is there a chance? Could we see the brothers united on the Rangers?
I don't think that's a realistic possibility right now. I think that the Rangers are looking more as if toward an outfielder at this point in time for their next edition. They've got a guy in Isaiah Kiner-Falefa who would be a super utility guy if that is his ultimate role with the Rangers. But he also will go to camp as a candidate to play third base, with Josh Young being the top prospect in the organization, getting a chance to compete for that job as well. So I think they're set in the infield right now, Ben. I think the bigger issue is, what do they do to kind of complete the outfield? You've got Seiya Suzuki out there still in the posting period and able to negotiate with teams again once we get back to work. And you've got some guys like Kyle Schwarber that I think hold a lot of interest for the Rangers as well.
So let me ask you this. Corey Seager, 10 years, 325. Marcus Semien, who's, an older guy, 7 years, 175. Do you think they overpaid for these guys? And do you think they had to get them there?
I think we're only going to be able to tell if they overpaid for guys ultimately in how their contract pays out. But I think if you look at the market and look at what the projections were, certainly to get Semien in the door, everybody thought it was going to take 5 or 6 years on the open market. The Rangers went to 7. I think the AAV was right in line with what most people expected for Semien. And so, yeah, I do look at it as kind of a tax or surcharge or penalty for being a losing team for the last 5 years and for losing 102 games. To get somebody to buy into the vision was not just going to take a really strong presentation, which I think the Rangers made to both guys, but I think it was also going to take backing it up with better than just fair market value. And in Semien, they certainly did that. I think the projection that I had seen on MLB Trade Rumors was right in line with either 10 and 320 for Seager or 10 and 325. So they went right to the height of what was the projected market.
So we're locked out right now. Nothing's happening. Nothing's going on. Do you think they're done? Do you think when we come back and transactions are back open and teams are signing people, do you think the Texas Rangers keep making moves?
Yeah, I think they've got two additional budgets. I think they've got a budget to continue to add, and then I think they've got a budget that also includes getting Clayton Kershaw if Clayton decides that he wants to come home and pitch for the Rangers. And I think that they are separate things, because I think the Rangers are still going to go out and add an outfielder and maybe another pitcher, regardless of what Clayton decides to do. But I think once Clayton makes a decision, even if the Rangers are all full up, they'll find another, whatever it takes, 20, 22 million to add Clayton Kershaw to the middle of that rotation if he's willing to kind of say, I'm closing the chapter on this part of my Dodgers career. Certainly he's always going to be a legacy figure in LA. But if he decides that with a family now that's going to be 4, his wife is due with their 4th baby anytime now, the kid's older in school, and the possibility that the Rangers are an organization on the rise, maybe it does make some sense for Clayton to come home and finish out his career in Texas, whether that's 2 years or 4.
Well, that was going to be my next question, was about Kershaw. How committed are they to getting Kershaw there? How likely is it to happen? And it seems like they're very committed. It seems like they have a budget specifically to get Clayton Kershaw to come home. And basically, it's your decision, Clayton. We want you here. We're going to give you this money. If you want to come home, we're glad to have you.
I think you got it summed up entirely correctly. And I think the Rangers also respect Clayton, and I think the Dodgers respect Clayton enough that both teams know he's going to make the decision that's right for him. There's no amount of recruiting or pressure that either side can put on him. This is a decision that's going to be best for Clayton Kershaw, Ellen Kershaw, their family, and to some degree their foundation, because that really is a major amount of work that they both put in. So ultimately, I think once the baby arrives, Clayton and Ellen will sit down and say, okay, what do we want to do for the long term? And if he wants to come to Texas, they're going to find a way to make that happen. And I think they should. I think he'd be an outstanding force for the Rangers' younger pitchers to really learn from. And I think certainly if he's healthy, there's no doubt that Clayton is still a top-tier pitcher.
Yeah. So for the last few years at this point, the Texas Rangers have not been very good. They've been almost the laughing stock of the AL West. And then they get this brand new stadium that by all accounts I've heard is immaculate. It's impressive. It's incredible. Now they're making all of these moves. Fans are going to be in the seats. These are the sexy moves, if you will, that they're getting done. But are they the right moves? Where will the Texas Rangers be this year? Are they good enough to compete when all is said and done and play ball is said in 2022? Will they compete to win the AL West title?
Well, I think the other day when the Rangers introduced all 4 of those players, I said that as they sit right now, the Rangers are a significantly better team than they were in 2021, but the bar for that wasn't real high, right? They had won 60 games. They're a better team, though. Do I think they're a contender right now? I'm not going to put a ceiling on them and say they're not a contender, but I think they'd still have to have a lot of things go their way. We look at the American League West right now, and look, I heard there a source reported that the Astros are going to give $50 million to Justin Verlander. I don't know who that was, but you've got the Mariners have just added the reigning Cy Young Award winner in the American League. The Angels have added 4 pitchers and dropped $103 million to shore up a team that already has the best hitter and the best phenom in all of baseball. So I think the West is a really strong division, is going to continue to be so for a long term. And the Rangers went into this thinking they were going to do as much as they could to make this team better, but also knew that this wasn't necessarily a one-year expense. They're going to probably have to add more money to the payroll after 2023 to continue to address some issues. But they've got a top 10 farm system right now. They're going to draft 3rd overall next year. By the time we get to the trade deadline of next year, you're going to be looking at a team that's significantly better on the major league side and probably has a top 5 minor league system in all of baseball. So I think what they're trying to say is we've got a financial engine with Globe Life Field in which they run events out of there every week at this point in time. There are high school football games going on right now. There's concerts, everything. It's really become an economic engine. We've got that. We've got a minor league system that's on the rise, and we've got the financial capability to add good faith effort to bettering the major league club. And so I think you triangulate all of that. You don't say it's a one-year jump, but if you're willing to make a long-term effort, absolutely, this team could be significantly improved for 2022. And I think the sky is really the limit going into 23.
Yeah. Evan, I heard the source on that Verlander deal is a pretty good source. So I'm gonna believe it.
Listen, I'm completely willing to accept that sourcing on the Justin Verlander.
Hey, before I let you go, you just brought up Globe Life, and I mentioned it a couple times in this show that I haven't been there, but I really want to get there. I've heard incredible things from what you've seen in terms of other stadiums you've been to, and obviously I know you've been to Globe Life. How incredible is it? I've heard amazing things.
You know, one thing that really stuck out to me, and listen, $500 million is $500 million, and that's going to pay for a lot of players. But both Simeon and Seager made a point of talking about the facility. And certainly Corey had a very nice little run there in 2020 when he hit 8 home runs between a series and the postseason. And I think the two things, Ben, that are really significant here are that place was really loud. There were a couple games this year against the Astros when the Rangers did have about 35,000 people in there, and they walked Houston off both times. And that place erupted, and it was as loud as any stadium I've ever been in. The second thing is that this is no longer going to be a absolute portal to hell for major league pitchers. Guys are going to come in here with a retractable roof. It's going to be comfortable for them to pitch. The stadium dimensions are more pitcher friendly than the old ballpark.
Yeah.
And the problem that the Rangers always had in terms of luring pitchers to come to Texas, I think that's going to go away. So I think they've got assets in terms of how they're able to use it as a multi-use event and to add dollars to the bottom line. I think it's a better, more fair ballpark, and I think it's going to kind of eliminate that stigma that it was a place that pitchers went to die. And I think those are all really beneficial elements for the Rangers.
Well, Evan, thank you so much for joining, man. I really appreciate it. I'm in awe of what the Rangers have been doing this offseason, and you've been right on top of it. So thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it, and come back anytime. I appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me, man.
Of course. See ya. Thanks for watching. If you love flipping bats, swinging 3-0, or just talking ball, join us. Call us at 213-537-9339 with your questions. We have a weekly guest, and we have a lot of fun, so hit that subscribe button.